He looked at the face of the little device strapped to his wrist yet again, impatiently. He had run out of energy searching for another verse with another hymn, the right hymn. And now he had to wait a full 8 hours for that device to recharge. "God damn these small power cells," he complained. "They could have at least thrown in another battery. Don't they know who I am? I'm Steve fucking Buscemi!" He complained again to himself. Time was inching past at a snail's pace, taunting him. He laid back in his protective pod that Adam Sandler had given him on his 52nd birthday. And he thought about the last Buscemi he visited. He went by the name of Ed. But make no mistake, he was a Buscemi, identical in every way, save for his personality and life experience. By God, he was perfect, nearly anyway. Steve remembered that version of himself. He remembered being in that role. He remembered playing that part, and he missed it. Ed was so close to being the perfect Buscemi, if it wasn't for that stupid reanimated cannibal bitch mother of his. What a killjoy she was. Steve's legs still throb from that whole incident, and he can't get a full night's sleep without seeing the flash of those stained dentures or that plump white face coming right for him. If it wasn't for her, he just might have stayed. Steve thought about meeting Ed for the first time, not just playing him in a film, but seeing him in the flesh. Like all the Buscemis that Steve had met, he was a little bit shocked, a bit frightened. But just like all those other Buscemis, there was a glint of excitement in his eyes. Steve explained some of the situation to his alternate self, and Ed listened engrossed. Steve talked about all the planets he'd traveled to, all the versions of himself that he'd seen. Some he observed from afar, some he avoided completely, and some he got to know pretty well. Ed sat listening to the story, amazed and enthralled, and Steve, he moved ever closer. He was mere inches away now. Ed noticed, obviously, but he didn't dare move. He was invested, curious. Then it happened. Steve was mid-sentence when Ed had the uncontrollable urge to press his lips against Steve's lips, cutting his words short. Steve placed his hand on the back of his head and pulled him a little deeper into that kiss. Steve was hoping for this. He knew the chances were high that it would happen, and it did. They undressed one another, exploring each other's bodies. They were nearly mirror images of each other. Ed had a few more scars than Steve did, but Steve liked that. Ed stopped suddenly. Wait. I'm not gay, Steve. What are we doing? Have you ever touched yourself? Steve asked. Well, of course I have, but this isn't the same thing, Ed proclaimed, feeling ashamed and confused. Steve placed his hand tenderly on Ed's leg, and he said to his other self, "You are me. We are the same, Ed. Through time and space, and across the multiverse, you are a part of me, an echo of what I could have been. I know you've always wondered what it would be like to feel how you touched, how you kissed, how you fucked. I wondered, just like I wonder about you now." Steve finished his monologue, waiting to see the reaction from his counterpart. Ed looked at him, biting his lower lip ever so slightly, and he leaned into Steve yet again. For the first time in Ed's life, he got to experience the receiving end of his own member. It was so foreign, so invasive, but he was too intrigued by the new experience to put an end to it, too curious. Steve and Ed took turns traversing the valleys and towers of each other's bodies for most of the night. Steve thought he found the one. They fell asleep next to each other, but then Steve awoke with a start to find Ed's mother standing over him with a long butcher's knife, looking utterly confused and equally as angry. "Who or what is this thing, Ed?" Mabel, Ed's mother, hissed. "Who is this imposter?" She bellowed as she moved inhumanly quick to stab the body double laying next to her precious boy. Steve barely managed to move out of the way as the knife sunk deep into the mattress. Ed was shouting, "Mother, please! You don't understand! Don't hurt him! He's me!" This did nothing to quell his mother's confused rage, and she lunged yet again at Steve. This time, Steve wasn't so lucky, and Mabel sank her teeth deep into his calf muscles. She was impossibly strong for a woman in her 70s, too strong for anyone even in their prime, and that bite was like an animal. Mabel tore into Steve's leg like a ravenous beast, snarling like a demon. Steve wailed, "Help me, Ed! Get this bitch off me!" Ed, a little bit offended, said, "That's my mother!" as he pulled on her legs, trying to free Steve from that bite. Steve wondered what kind of denture glue held these porcelain daggers in place. Fix-A-Dent? Polygrip? It would make for one hell of an endorsement of the strength of their product, whichever one it was. But it was no use. Steve could feel the blood running down his leg and feel Mabel's iron grip growing tighter and tearing deeper. He screamed louder, and he heard something equally as terrifying as this nightmare mother with her superhuman strength and pitbull-like bite. He heard the door open and shut. Ed had run out the door. In a panic, Steve began raining punches down on the old woman's head, blow after blow. Nothing, not a goddamn thing. She made almost no reaction, just bit deeper and harder. Then her hand let go of his thigh. It raced up between his legs, and before Steve could even blink, she had them. The boys, his boys. She was biting, pulling, twisting, squeezing. Steve flailed wildly, screaming for Ed to help him, seemingly for eternity. But it wasn't an eternity. This was all in the matter of 2-3 minutes tops. And then he heard it. Shunk! Mabel's body went limp. The grip on the boys loosened, and Mabel's teeth left the leg of Steve Buscemi. Ed had come back. He had run to the woodpile in the backyard and retrieved his uncle's axe, and he swung it through his own mother's neck. "She was never the same after she died," Ed sobbed. "The man said $1,000 and he would bring her back, good as new." But the woman that was brought back was a perverse other, a facsimile of his mother. Except something wasn't quite right. For one, she longed for human flesh, was absurdly strong, and even more annoying than she was when she was alive the first time. Ed knew it was unnatural to reanimate his mother, but he loved her. He wasn't ready to see her gone. But she had gone too far, and Ed could not simply sit by while she murdered and ate the man who had opened a world to him he never even thought possible. This was the right decision. Ed sat on the floor holding the head of his decapitated mother, weeping. His mother just looked up at him disappointedly. She always thought it was a really weak thing for a man to cry, and she furrowed her eyebrows. Ed looked down at his mother's look of annoyance at him, suddenly got really angry at the disembodied judgment of his now twice dead mother, and threw the head out the open window. Steve knew he messed this one up. He had to get out of there. He slid himself off the bed onto his one good leg, grabbed the sheet to wrap himself, and hobbled out of the room. Ed didn't even follow. He just sat on the end of the bed, weeping. Steve couldn't help but cringe as he made his way back to his pod. Big oof! This alternate was definitely tainted, and there was no way to make this work. And just like he came into poor Ed's life, he left it just the same. Steve, lost in memory and dozing off, didn't even notice when the battery full indicator lit on his device. He sat in thought, wondering, what's the next iteration of himself he would find? And is this the one to be the one? With a quick glimpse of white chompers and slightly blue old lady hair, he fell asleep in his pod with a shudder. Starring Steve's alternate Ed from the 1993 film Ed and His Dead Mother.